One time, we successfully mated a bulldog with a Shih Tzu.
Really? That's weird.
Yeah, we called it a bullshit.
Okay, is this guy just making it up as he goes? Yep. Is it all BS? Yep. Here's Big Nate with some more BS, because it's BSing with Big Nate.
Welcome into another edition of BSing with Big Nate. Really stoked on this one. Of course, this whole weekend we've had a theme. It's all kind of been horror related. So I am joined by the brains and talent behind a little radio program and podcast. Not to say it's little, it's quite fantastic, but coming out of Portland, Oregon, sort of. I'm joined by Zach, Ragan, Chris. Guys, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, of course.
Hello.
All right, so first and foremost, the show, The Ghost of Hollywood, airs on KBOO FM out in Portland, Oregon, also called KBOO. And I want you guys to give me a background first on kind of the formation of the podcast, and then we'll dig into what it's all about.
All right. So the skinny of it, I guess it all kind of comes down to summer last year. I'd been working working on another program at KBOO, but a lot of people had kind of fallen off. They had a lot of trouble with remote programming and stuff like that. So we ended up offering to do like a one-off show. I had a friend named Steven at the time who was really, we were both into like campy movies and late night shows and shit. And he's like, he kind of showed up at the station with me a couple of times and checked it out. And I was like, well, why don't we just do like one late night radio show? So we did a one-off called War Pigs Arcade, and we wrote like six episodes for it. And we recorded it at my house, and Ragan did a voice for it.
Yeah. It wasn't exactly a voice. I just acted really mean and we sped it up. So I guess it was kind of a voice, but I didn't really physically change my voice at all. It's just a lot of editing for it.
Yeah. So we would go from we did that for a little bit, and then we kind of got tired of working with Steven. And So we decided to go out on our own, and we originally didn't know if we were going to get a regular slot. And once we got a regular slot, we decided we would write. We finished with War Pigs Arcade, and we're like, okay, I guess we'll change the name and kind of do something that's a little more structured. We keep messing with the structure. So we started doing that late night. And it runs, it runs like 3 to 5:30 a.m. every other Friday. So really, more people probably hear the podcast. We can get special slots if we want, but it'd be great if we get earlier times. But that's what we run it. Because of its explicit content, it'll never run before 10 p.m. It barely meets FCC regulations as it is. The podcast, it does all right though. And once we started bringing people in, that's when to do interviews for the movies that we were discussing. That's when me and Chris go way back to like playing air guitar in his bedroom in the 6th grade. We were like best friends, our whole life. So I asked Chris, who does a lot of writing, he's a writer, and I was like, why don't you come and help me out writing the show? I was getting my ass kicked because it was bi-weekly for a while. And I was like, why don't you help me out writing the show and stuff? So he set in with first episode we did Polyester, John Waters' film. And we interviewed cinematographer for that film, Dave Inslee. And Chris set in that one and kind of showed them ropes. And then after that, we've written the next 3 or 4 episodes since, and we're coming up on the end of the first season now. So that's where we stand. Chris, you can tell you what you got going on.
Oh yeah, no, that was more of the culmination story than what I had originally had. It all started for me. I think I was just getting off of like some crazy 12-hour shift at work. And I'd been corresponding with Zach via email, just like sending him random writings for like the past 6 months. So he already knew I had like this drive to want to write and do something. But at the same time, like it was kind of like a foolhardy pursuit because I didn't have anything I was writing for necessarily. So it was kind of like a blessing that he called me one night. I was just getting out of my car. He said, I got to run something by you. I was wondering if you wanted to kind of come in and co-write on this kind of podcast interview thing I'm doing, and I just jumped on it immediately. I was all for it. So yeah, I listened in on the Dave Inslee one for Polyester, and then we worked on Courtney Joyner for Class of '99 together. And the one we just wrapped, I think we've kind of got our process down a little bit. So I'm really excited for next season, because I feel like we just like hit a stride, but we're just ending the first season at the same time. So hopefully it ends on a high note. It just keeps momentum moving forward for us.
I mean, that's kind of how it works with all great things, is you hit that stride and then you have to hit that. And then you just kind of build from there. I'm definitely looking forward to the second season. Full disclosure, I mean, of course, I haven't finished the first season because the final episode's Friday. Not this. Well, yeah, no, it will be Friday the 30th.
Yeah, it's the 30th. Yeah, we got a new one coming out. We haven't even announced for the 30th. We kind of changed. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that a little later on. We will talk about all right. Try and pull it out of you. But how's that work with you guys being kind of in very opposite areas?
We have I would say it's kind of, it took a while to develop it. Now that it has, at first I would send, like, I gave Chris the interview and I would send it to him and give him like some pointers. So when we went and worked with Courtney, the process varies. Like, if, for instance, with Courtney, we couldn't find much of any material on Class of '99. So we reach out, usually we'll just start calling people and call their agents, however you can get in touch with them, various ways. Yeah. And once we get them on the phone or via email or whatever, we'll usually talk with them. So like with Courtney Joyner, we sat and talked with him for a while, or we talked with Kristen Folk for the Hollywood Theater, was the last episode we did, and she was the development director there. So again, there's not a lot of information. We'll pre-screen them basically. So we just have an informal conversation and I start talking to him and just kind of give him a rough interview. And Chris writes, and he's basically, my stenographer in that sense, because I don't have to pay as much attention to what's going on. So his brain's attuned to the conversation and he writes everything down, and then really we'll go from there. He would develop a rough draft and send it to me, but we kind of we hate deadlines and we like to work together. It's more fun. So lately we've just been jumping on Zoom or FaceTime, and we get in a Google Doc and we start working on it together. And, he'll get a glass of whiskey and I'll light up smoke and we'll go to it, and so we back and forth. It's a lot more fun sharing ideas that way too, because we get the same idea what we want to do. We have to put it in context though, so.
Well, that's the other thing. How do you decide? Is there kind of like a divining rod for your topic? I mean, of course, obviously the Christmas, I think it was Christmas Day, the Christmas Day episode, Silent Night, Deadly Night. That makes perfect sense. Class of 1999. That's one that, like, I didn't realize other people had actually seen that. And then I was like, holy hell. And to have the writer on. So like, how do you guys pick and choose what you're going to talk about?
Chris, why don't you tell them about how the last one went down with Arena? Because that one was a pretty quirky.
Oh my God. So we wanted to do this old movie, the sci-fi movie from the 80s called Arena. And Zach's better with the names. His depth of Hollywood knowledge far exceeds mine. But I don't know how I found this 1980s movie, sci-fi movie called Arena. And it was all about an Earthling on another planet who was fighting like androids and other aliens, basically for his right to get off that planet again. But we ended up, I sent that to him. I thought it looked awesome. I was like, hey, this kind of goes in line with like Class of '99, kind of like that sci-fi B film almost niche. And he was like, yeah, this looks great. Let me do some cold calls. And you'd have to go through him for the list of people that he ended up talking to. But like, it's one person opened up the door for another person, and we got completely off of Arena and ended up on what we're going to be coming out with following the latest drop. But yeah, Zach, if you want to go through, because it was really like everybody, and we just kind of went up a totem pole.
So it goes this way, right? So like with this one, Chris is like, why don't we do Arena? He's and I was like, I hadn't seen this movie, so let me go check out Arena. So me and Ragan go watch Arena. And we're like, all right, this is good. Let's check out who's behind the film. Well, like nobody's in the damn thing, and then, but Erwin Yablans produced it. And then there's these two guys named Paul DeMeo and Danny Bilson who wrote it. All right. So it's like a Charles Band film, which is like Enterprise Full Moon stuff. Very B, like King of the B films, of the 1980s in a weird way, maybe. Maybe I shouldn't be selling that title to him exactly. But anyway, so I got Paul DeMeo is dead, passed away a few years ago, I believe, from cancer. But his writing partner, Danny Bilson, there was something they had worked on when they were pretty young. And they had worked on a film called Trancers together, which was actually a pretty successful Charles Band cult classic and had like tons of sequels and stuff like that. And I had seen Trancers, and Bilson had gone on, man, he's done all kinds of stuff. His daughter was Rachel Bilson on what's that show, the OC? Yeah, and then his dad was like director of Andy Griffith, assistant director for a while, and did a bunch of other stuff. So they worked on The Flash, they did The Rocketeer, and then most recently they did The Five Blood. So I was like, let's reach out and talk to this guy. He's doing a bunch of stuff, if he'll even talk to us, because and I called or I emailed and was like, hey, would you be interested in talking about your work on Trancers? And that's usually where Chris has to keep me in line, because I'll go down these rabbit holes and find all this stuff out and want to interview these people about their whole life. And he's like, exactly, we have to stay on the topic of the film and not write a 7-page interview. So that's pretty much how it goes. We wind up down this rabbit hole, and we go from like Arena to, Spike Lee's new film, The Five Bloods, which ended up being a pretty cool opportunity to talk about the writers with that. So, it comes up around the corner. It's always something weird.
No, I think that's what kind of makes, and it definitely embodies, and that's something that I really appreciate about this show, is it feels, the way it's formatted, this is a morning show, for better or worse, that was made specifically for someone like me.
Yeah.
Right.
It doesn't stay necessarily on the beaten path. You've kind of got the traditional elements with the fucked up news, and then you got your interview portion, and then kind of just picking a little piece. It's like that morning show mentality where you kind of, it's easy to consume and sit there and enjoy and like kind of really get lost in listening to it.
Yeah.
And I do notice you definitely do go down rabbit holes, but it works so very well that I would have a hard time discouraging that. So it's very good that Chris is there to kind of keep that in line.
Yeah, he definitely keeps a structure to it. Like, and it makes for good dialogue when Ragan and I are talking about things. I think you have to kind of concentrate it, like in the writing gets more concentrated on Ragan does a lot of the table reading and basically just goes behind. I'll write a lot of stuff out, and Reagan's like, Dad, have you read this yet? Because it makes no sense.
Yeah.
So I'll have to go make sense of it for other people, because I want to throw in these weird little Easter eggs. I should let you explain yourself.
Well, when he writes, a lot of times either we try to be funny about something, and either like it's not really that funny, or we have some of these little random facts, and I'm just like, these don't fit here. Like, they don't, like, cool facts, but they're not exactly meant to be right here. That's really much how I, like, when I go to read over the scripts and practice it, that's really, sometimes we get just whole giant segments where we're just like, nope, none of this makes sense. Let's just,
we'll delete it.
Yeah, just like, goodbye. Nope, no more of this.
Yeah, and then it's the same with the interviews. It was like the other day, Chris, you were like, when I'm like, all right, we could go on and ask him about his this, and you're like, Zach, is this gonna, when is this gonna, what are we gonna do?
We were getting into the drink and the smoke, and it just kept going and going. And like, we had this awesome format, like 2 pages of basically script of what we wanted to talk about. And then there was like bullet points at the end that just kind of crisscrossed and jumped all over the place. And we had to like take a step back and breathe and be like, I think we got off topic again.
Yeah, and it's changed a lot. I mean, when we first started, I think the first, 5 episodes, like up until the the Christmas special, because we started doing 1 a month. Ragan and I were like buried in work.
Yeah, we were just like, I feel like after you'd finished 1 episode, it was like a day later, it's like, all right, time for the next episode. And it's like, I feel like now when you do it, do an episode every month, you're not like covered in work.
Yeah, because she does another program, and then I do too, but she has her own, like, completely own program for an hour. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of that space to cover, and doing it a month kind of gives me and Chris, it gives us a lot more time to really focus in on stuff. Before, we were just writing, almost doing like some small level campy retrospective on films that we liked.
Yeah.
And now that we actually have changed the format to interviewing people, the thing that's different is we can't really go past the 70s because a lot of these people are dead. You know, if we do a film from the 40s or the 50s, we're almost talking to, like, if we would have interviewed anybody from when we did Blackboard Jungle, I mean, Sidney Poitier and Nancy Olson are in their 90s. So we would have probably talked to, like, Lynn Ford's son would have been the closest to anyone we could have talked to outside of historians. So we've kind of had to bring the format up to the future, and we've written out some things. Like, we got rid of Scenes or Death, which we brought over from War Pigs Arcade. We've actually debated writing out Fucked Up News and kind of centralizing the format around cinema rather than like a late night radio show, which is how we really wanted to do it, you know, in the beginning. Now we've kind of tidied it down, and Cinematic Dumpster Fire has worked for us because that segment is still about film. And so, you know, it's a little, I mean, it's just about what's gone wrong on film sets or something, you know,
which is that's something that people like to know. Like, that's definitely something that really stands out. Like, I didn't know. I knew, like I said, I was listening to Class of 1999 today, and I knew Maximum Overdrive was a train wreck. I didn't in particular know about your camera operator just completely losing an eye.
Yeah.
Like, holy hell.
That's
one of the rabbit hole, too. That's one of those rabbit holes. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's cool. I think we're going to say the same thing because we talk about it all the time. It's one of the cool things about doing the podcast that we're doing and interviewing these people and getting it straight from the source is, like, if you, let's say you have a niche movie that you've always liked, and you want to go and, like, just kind of learn more about it. You go on YouTube, you go on Google, Wikipedia, you do all these things. And there's only so much information you can ever find on these things. And well, I mean, we've got to do our research before we talk to a lot of these people about a lot of these projects. And we're in the same boat. We can only find X, Y, and Z because there's nothing else out there. But we get in there and we get to actually do a deep dive with the people that were there. And before you know it, I mean, things that we're talking about, that we're the source of information and bringing it to light, we're getting put up on these people's wiki pages and everything else because that information wasn't out there before. So it's really nice for us to kind of, like, not just shed a light on this, like, beautiful piece of cinematic history, but, like, kind of like rewrite a new chapter. Like, people think that book's closed, but there's so much that went on behind the scenes that no one knew about because, I mean, it was only talked about, like, mouth with crew. You know?
No, I think that's incredibly fascinating. I do want to ask Ragan, what is it like? And I'm trying not to be marginalizing or condescending, so I want you to appreciate this question. But going back, knowing what cinema's like now and music is like now, what's it like going back and looking at stuff that came out, you know, way back when?
Honestly, I think it's cool because, I mean, I have always been in that sort of, like, 80s era. Like, I've always been learning, like, even from the age when I was like 7, I was always being educated on older things. So now I'm hopping a little bit into the newer stuff. So I feel like when we do the radio show, it's cool to learn about movies because, I mean, when I was little, I learned a lot more about music and things of that nature. And I still really do love music. But what I think is cool is that I like movies a lot, and I think the podcast really, like, expands the history I know on these movies. And when I learn all these Easter egg facts, like you said, about Cinematic Dumpster Fire, like, I didn't really know any of that, and it's kind of hard sometimes to just go digging for that stuff. And when we do the radio show, it kind of expands on my knowledge of what's going on. So when I do these older things, I think it's cool because sometimes I can even make, like, relations to things like newer music and then, like, older music, because I know we don't exactly play a lot of the newest music that's come out. And I can make a lot of comparisons to that. So I like it a lot when we do older things. Like, I think it's cool, especially when we do the interviews, kind of like, well, we didn't do this, like, yesterday, but it happened a long time ago. And I think it's funny how things were a lot difficult back then because you didn't have things like iPhones and stuff of that nature. So when I get to learn about how they really did it, how it was a lot harder, I think that's really cool. So I think it's pretty cool when you get to learn about a lot of the older things that we do on the radio show. So I appreciate it a lot.
And Ragan brings up a good point. One of the things that was really nice about talking to Courtney Joyner about Class of '99 was just getting more details about the practical effects they use, because you don't see that even in movies that are intentionally. I mean, I feel like there's this trend with, and maybe not right now with everything going on, everything shut down and just not coming back up. There was this trend to be intentionally like B film, but still be like an A-list movie with big stars and stuff. And you don't get that grittiness that you used to get from like legit 80s and 70s sci-fi effects, because everything's CGI now. So one of the cool things about talking to Courtney was just learning about how they did the practical effects and actually being able to ask them, in this, how did you end up sucking this guy through the hole in the wall backwards and things like that. It was awesome.
No, it was definitely really compelling. And I think you guys offer a lot of compelling information. I mean, if there would be a show that should be IMDb sponsored, I think The Ghost of Hollywood is in fact it. There's some tidbits that you guys have pulled out that have been really insightful, but have also like taught me a lot. So I'm a big fan. I'm really excited to see it keep going. I do have to ask, Zach, where does Poxy Leonard come from?
Poxy Leonard.
That's been a thing before even the radio show, honestly.
Poxy's been different people too.
Yeah.
The name is just so Poxy was with War Pigs Arcade. I didn't have a character, and it was different because on the other show that I'm on, Life During Wartime, when I started DJing, I was pretty I was smashed, and I went in there for a guest host show and thought I'd be cute and act like Wolfman Jack on the radio, and then I just kind of stuck with Wolfman Zach until it became Wolfman.
Yeah.
When we started doing The Ghost of Hollywood, I wanted to separate myself from that a little bit. I didn't do it very well. The voices are about the same, but Steven, when he was War Pig, he was almost just more funnier than I was. So I was a straight man for the show, really. I wasn't as much a funny one. And that's where Poxy came from. And we've really had to like rewrite that character a few times since it developed, because when the first episode that we did together was really like, we were like, uh-oh.
Yeah, our characters, they're trying to get away from War Pig a lot. And I feel like when you start a new radio show and you're kind of like still digging into the characters, the first episode was really hard because we're like, wait, we're not these people anymore. We have to become somebody else.
And we are very different from our characters. Like I'm not, I mean, War Pigs Arcade was radio theater, and when we did Scenes or Death for Ghost of Hollywood, that was kind of radio theater where Ragan would like torture me and stuff. But and it was fun for us. I don't know how it translated across the medium, but we had a lot of fun doing voice acting and stuff with that. But the show just wasn't very like satirical and sarcastic. It was more like film history, and there seemed like we could do more with it. So we started writing the characters a little differently. And I mean, Reagan's character, I mean, she plays a person who would probably sound much older than she is. And I'm not a very humorous, sarcastic person. I'm a little bit more loquacious and introverted at the same time. I'll talk to you and not pay attention to what I'm saying is what I mean. But I think that the characters kind of develop. They seem to continue to develop. And the more that we're able to get off script and let them play back and forth with each other, that seems to transform. But that's really where Poxy Leonard came from. Other than that, it originally just started as like me acting like some stupid, insane version of Jerry Lewis to make fun of my kids. Well, it was originally, it was, and then, but that was like, that wasn't going to be a medium for the radio. So it became this instead.
No, I greatly enjoy it. I love everything you guys are doing. Of course, Friday the 30th, the new episode. You say you've got 2 more in season 1?
Yeah, we've got the next one, we've got Danny Bilson on, and I guess we kind of end up going from Trancers to talking about.
We talked really about a lot of other things than just Trancers, though. Yeah,
because he wrote a bunch of video games, like they wrote The Sims and a bunch of Harry Potter games. So he talked about, actually, we had Chris and I worked really hard on this interview. We had it all ready, and then we asked Danny like the first question, and
he literally just ran through all the questions.
Yeah.
We were going back and he's like, do you have any other questions? And we're like,
covered.
no, you answered pretty much all of them.
But so after that, we don't know. I mean, we usually keep it about an episode or so out because we have to start playing the call around game. I mean, and it's a bit nerve wracking. I mean, going into each episode, we could pick. Chris and I, or Ragan, sometimes she doesn't do as much with the writing. She'll come in for the second draft and stuff after we've done some reads and tell you what she thinks. But with this, we kind of give ourselves space. So like, we'll pick a couple of movies or a movie and see where the people that we're honing in on, where their career is. And even if they seem approachable, I mean, if we called like, Robert De Niro tomorrow, he's probably not going to want to talk to us. And, but we also get the opportunity to talk to we focus more on like the screenwriters, on people behind the scenes, because we get a lot of juice out of them. Like, when we interviewed Dave Inslee about Polyester, he talked about like this whole story. Like Chris was saying, we even do these raw interviews. Chris and I will do interviews with people, and they tell us a lot of things in material that we can't use, or like, like the people other stories that just aren't relevant to it about being extras in films and stuff like that. That is pretty cool. It's not relevant to the show. So we always learn a lot of weird, unique things. But the next episode after, the season finale, we haven't really put together yet. We'll probably, have to play the call around game before we know what happens.
Yeah, I think we've got a couple movies we had Zach had brainstormed and sent over, but yeah, I think we do need to get just kind of a call list together and start working on that.
Yeah. Luckily, people are pretty responsive most of the time. You'd be surprised. Yeah. We don't really sit and make like 50, 60 phone calls. We'll make 2 or 3, and we usually latch something and we go from there. And everybody's pretty busy. I mean, we deal with a lot of very busy people who, sometimes they're inactive in their career, sometimes they're not. Most of the time we're talking to them about less significant things. So like, we're talking to them about movies that are necessarily not so successful or more obscured in their career a long time ago. And I think because of that, it maybe presents an opportunity for them to discuss things that they usually don't get to that might help out some, but we're also pretty cut and dry because we know the process with them. So it's very yes, no, this time, that time, we'll see you then. And if we get a chance to screen them, cool. If we don't, then we learn as much as we can about them and just shoot the moon.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think there is, having never worked in cinema, however, I have worked in radio. There's stuff I've done in the past that I don't get to talk about because nobody's interested in it. And I would just jump at the chance if someone was like, hey, do you want to talk about your time on Horror Share Radio? Hell yeah, I do.
Well, you said you just did Horror Week, right? What's your focus with? What'd you go over?
So Friday, I was talking to a horror author that I've known for years. His name's Josh Haney. He's written a collection of short stories called Sentence Fragments of a Broken Mind, and then a novella called The Locket. But we just kind of discussed horror culture, and in particular, my goal was to focus on movies we should watch, but also Rob Zombie rebooting The Monsters. And then last night's episode, singer from Dying Oath, they're a band out of Wytheville. Her and I gave each other a movie we'd never seen before, and then we just kind of talked about the movies and our thoughts on them. I gave her Cube. She gave me High Tension.
All right.
And have you seen either of those or both of those?
What was the first one? I didn't hear the first one. I heard
Cube.
High Tension.
It came out in 1997. It's a Canadian film. And if you haven't, I highly recommend you watch it. Saw the entire franchise owes its ass to Cube. High Tension, really good. I gave it a 9 out of 10. It messes with your head, but I would recommend both. Cube's on YouTube and High Tension's actually on Pluto TV, so you could probably stream them for free.
All right, cool.
If you're into taking suggestions, I will say
no, I'm down. I totally take suggestions for film all the time because
we're both brainstorming how to get a hold of those people already.
They're both incredibly gory. They're both a fun ride. They're good at tension. I think that's kind of the most important part. They're not as necessarily campy. They're actually rather unsettling.
Yeah.
Usually I tend to, for like a fun watch, I'm watching Jason Takes Manhattan because I want to see a dude's head get punched clean off on a rooftop.
Yeah.
So It's definitely one of those, like, I wouldn't watch them back to back if you have a heart condition or a pacemaker.
Yeah.
See, I actually like, and that's weird. Like, we all come from like different interests in music and movies too. Like, Chris is, I don't want to speak for you, Chris, but I feel like you most definitely are able to pick up on like a lot of 80s films and a lot of cult things. You bring that to the table. So where I often bring in like the classics. I'm like the dinosaur. I'm like, let's go watch, something like Treasure Sierra Madre or something, like something silly, And then Ragan likes a lot of musicals and stuff. So
yeah.
Well, it makes for a good dynamic because if we can bring a little bit of everything to the table, then it reaches kind of a broader audience for us as well. Like, of course, every program sets out to kind of carve out that niche audience of theirs. But if we can appeal to a mass audience and everyone can find a little something they like, then that's a win-win for us. 'Cause, I mean, we love doing this and we all love different formats and cinemas and genres. So it's a unique experience for us to do it. And I hope it is able to translate into a unique experience for the listener as well.
Like
it feels like it was made for me.
Say again?
It feels like it was made for me. It's like you guys were in my head and Ghost of Hollywood came out.
Now, I think like what we want to do is like it continuously becomes transformative, and like Ragan things are opening back up, and Ragan has been in cinema or does like film acting and stuff beforehand, so she'll probably get back into that some. But where we're going forward with it, we would like to, like we've debated maybe trying to get other people involved with it, like or go down and talk to some people who have worked behind some of these movies and just offer to do something more like a retrospective, something that would allow us to be able to a little more conducive to us being able to actually do what we want to do a little more regularly than once a month or so. But that evolving door or evolving things kind of is difficult with being from a nonprofit, and conjoined to KBOO. We don't really know how we can branch out and what we're able to do and not to do with those, this podcast simultaneously being on the air. So there's a lot of learning curve with any development that we do want to do. Or put in force. So.
It's always like building something like this. Guys, I thank you so very much for joining me. Friday the 30th. Does the podcast go up at the same time as it airs, or is that after?
Yeah, I mean, it's it goes up usually before, and I mean the podcast is really the way to go because the podcast isn't censored. Yeah. So you really get the full meat of it there. And the podcast has its own website. I mean, you can find it on any kind of platform as far as Spotify to Apple Music or whatnot. And it's just The Ghost of Hollywood. The website is theghost-of-hollywood-podcast.com. And, you can find all the episodes there. The first 3 episodes we didn't put into podcast format. They were they were created for the radio, and they were pretty much a trial run. So we've left those. You can find them as well and a bunch of additional information about the show and Ragan and Chris and I on KBOO.FM, and just check out the Go Hollywood, on there as well. So there's plenty out there about it.
Well, be ready for April the 30th. Get caught up now. Zach, Ragan, Chris, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, man.
Thanks for having us.